All right, so today we're going deep. We're diving into the Battle of Britain. We're going to be looking at an episode of Dan Snow's History Hit podcast.
Yeah.
Um, and this episode really digs into the human drama of this incredibly important air battle. Can you imagine what the world would be like if Britain had fallen to Nazi Germany in 1940?
Yeah, it's a chilling thought, isn't it? And what makes this battle so unique is that it was the first major conflict that was fought almost entirely in the air. Um, so you have to imagine this kind of shift in warfare, the sheer scale of it, thousands of planes clashing in the skies over the English countryside, with the fate of Britain hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And, one of the things that really struck me listening to Dan Snow's podcast was just how young so many of these pilots were.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these guys were barely out of their teens, and yet they were entrusted with defending their country against, this seemingly unstoppable force.
Absolutely. And the pressure they faced was just immense. They were flying multiple missions every single day, knowing that each takeoff could be their last. And yet they displayed just extraordinary courage and skill. But it wasn't just about individual bravery. The British had a bit of a secret weapon up their sleeve, and that was radar.
Ah, yes, radar.
Yeah.
That innovative radar system that the British had developed, and this was coupled with a network of human observers on the ground. And this gave them a crucial advantage in the battle. It's like they had this early warning system that allowed them to see the German Luftwaffe coming from miles away.
Right. It was a game changer. It enabled them to anticipate enemy attacks and scramble their own fighter planes to meet the German bombers and their fighter escorts head on.
But even with radar, the pressure on those RAF pilots must have been absolutely incredible. They were outnumbered, often outgunned, facing this determined enemy.
No, absolutely. And can't forget the toll it took on the Luftwaffe pilots as well. They were flying long distances, they were facing fierce resistance from the RAF, and they were watching their comrades fall from the sky. So you can imagine the psychological strain on both sides must have been just immense.
Yeah, the whole thing just sounds absolutely harrowing. So let's talk about how this battle unfolded. So in August of 1940, the Germans realized that if they had any hope of invading Britain, they needed to cripple the Royal Air Force.
Right.
So they shifted their focus to trying to destroy RAF Fighter Command.
That's right. And their strategy was to target key airfields. And they were trying to destroy the planes and the infrastructure on the ground. And they particularly focused on these operations rooms, which were essentially the nerve centers where the British were coordinating their defenses.
And it's in those very operations rooms where we see some of the most compelling human drama of the battle unfold.
Yeah.
Dan Snow tells this amazing story about Corporal Elizabeth Henderson, who was a member of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. And she was stationed at the Biggin Hill Operations Room.
Yeah, and her story is incredible. Imagine the pressure she was under. German planes are attacking all around her, bombs are raining down, and she's there in this operations room calmly plotting German raids on our plotting table, making sure that the RAF fighters are directed to where they're needed most. And for her bravery under fire, she was awarded the military medal.
Wow, talk about grace under pressure.
Right.
And speaking of bravery, we can't forget about the Polish 303 Squadron. These were Polish pilots who had escaped from Poland and France, and they were eager to get into the fight against the Germans.
Yeah, they were champing at the bit to get involved. And once they were finally allowed to join the battle, they proved to be some of the most effective pilots in the entire RAF. They had a score to settle with the Germans.
Yeah, they had seen firsthand the brutality of the Nazi regime.
Absolutely. And they fought with just incredible ferocity and skill.
Now, this next story that Dan Snow shares in his podcast is both incredible and incredibly tragic. It's the story of two brothers, Tony and Patrick Woods-Gowan, both fighter pilots. And both of them were deeply in love with the same woman, a woman named Bunny Lawrence.
It's a story that really encapsulates the human cost of war and the sacrifices that so many people made.
Yeah, these were young men in the prime of their lives fighting for their country and for love.
Absolutely.
And both of these brothers were incredibly brave and skilled pilots. Tony, for instance, he actually had near blindness in one eye, but he managed to hide this from the RAF when he signed up. And he ended up getting shot down multiple times. But he kept coming back for more. He was determined to do his part.
His determination was incredible. And then there's Patrick, who was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for shooting down numerous German planes. He was known for his cool head and his precision flying.
So both of these brothers really were heroes. And here's where the story gets even more interesting. Tony, despite his vision problems, proposed to Bunny, and she accepted. But sadly, Their happiness was short-lived.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking story. Within 24 hours of each other, both brothers were killed in separate incidents. Patrick died while bailing out of his damaged Hurricane fighter. And then Tony, just a day later, met the same fate while trying to bail out of his Spitfire. Can you imagine the grief that Bunny must have felt? Just 19 years old and having lost the two men she loved most in the world. And she went on to collect both of their medals from the king. It's a testament to her strength and the depth of their love for one another.
It really makes you think about the fragility of life, especially during wartime. And as if the loss of these brave young men wasn't enough, the battle was about to take a devastating turn for the people of London. A seemingly accidental German bombing of London in late August 1940 enraged Hitler, and he shifted the Luftwaffe's focus.
This was a major turning point. It marked the beginning of what became known as the Blitz.
The Blitz.
This period of intense and sustained bombing of London and other British cities. It was a brutal campaign aimed at breaking the spirit of the British people and forcing them to surrender.
And on September 7, 1940, London faced its first massive raid. Hundreds of German bombers attacked the city, causing widespread devastation and heavy casualties.
Yeah, for those on the ground, it must have been terrifying. Imagine the sirens wailing, the anti-aircraft guns firing the explosions, shaking the city, and fires raging throughout the night.
It must have felt like the end of the world. But as tragic as the Blitz was for London, this shift in focus actually gave RAF Fighter Command a much-needed respite. You see, they had been stretched thin defending their airfields all across southern England, but now they had a clearer objective: defend the capital.
That's right. They were able to regroup, re-strategize, and focus their defenses on a more predictable target.
So the Blitz had begun a terrifying new chapter in this battle. But even as London was being bombed, the RAF was still holding on, preventing the Luftwaffe from achieving that crucial air superiority. How did they manage to keep fighting despite facing such overwhelming odds?
Well, you have to remember, this became a war of attrition, as much about resources and willpower as it was about tactical maneuvers. And the British, despite being outnumbered, they had a few key advantages that were working in their favor.
We've talked about the radar system before, and I imagine that played a huge role in kind of evening the odds.
Absolutely. Radar was a game changer. It gave the RAF the ability to see these incoming German formations while they were still miles away, which meant they could scramble their fighters more efficiently, direct them to the best interception points.
So it was like having a real-time map of the skies, allowing them to anticipate and react to the Luftwaffe's movements.
Exactly. It gave them a tactical advantage that the Germans simply couldn't match at that time. They could see what the Luftwaffe was doing even before the German pilots themselves were fully aware of the situation.
That's incredible. But technology aside, it still took immense courage for those RAF pilots to go up and face the Luftwaffe day after day, flying multiple missions, facing constant danger, and witnessing the destruction below.
It's true. They were incredibly brave and resilient, and we can't forget their skill as pilots. They were highly trained, and they were flying some of the best fighter planes in the world at that time, aircraft like the Spitfire and the Hurricane.
I've always been fascinated by the Spitfire. It's such an iconic symbol of British defiance during the war, what made it so effective in combat.
The Spitfire was a marvel of engineering, renowned for its speed, agility, and maneuverability. In the hands of a skilled pilot, it could outmaneuver the German Messerschmitt fighters, giving the RAF a crucial edge in dogfights.
So you've got these incredibly skilled pilots flying superior aircraft and backed up by this groundbreaking radar system. It's no wonder they were able to hold off the Luftwaffe, even during the darkest days of the Blitz.
It was a combination of factors for sure, but it wasn't easy. The RAF suffered heavy losses, the pressure on the pilots was immense, but they held on, and their tenacity prevented the Germans from achieving that all-important air superiority.
And that air superiority was essential for the Germans if they wanted to launch a successful invasion of Britain, right?
Absolutely. Without control of the skies, any invasion attempt would have been extremely risky, if not impossible. The RAF stood as a crucial barrier, a shield protecting Britain from Nazi occupation.
And then came September 15th, 1940, a day that has come to be known as Battle of Britain Day. This was the Luftwaffe's all-out effort to break the RAF once and for all.
It was a pivotal moment in the battle. The Luftwaffe launched massive air raids, sending wave after wave of bombers and fighters against London and key RAF airfields. The skies over southern England were filled with the roar of engines and the staccato bursts of machine gun fire.
Dan Snow paints a very vivid picture of this day in his podcast. He describes it as a swirling, chaotic ballet of death, with hundreds of planes clashing in a desperate struggle for air supremacy.
It was a day of intense aerial combat with pilots on both sides pushing their skills and courage to the limit. And amidst the chaos and carnage, individual acts of heroism emerged. Dan Snow recounts the story of Ray Holmes, an RAF pilot who found himself in an unimaginable situation.
What happened?
He was attacking a German bomber that was approaching London, but he had run out of ammunition. Faced with this desperate situation, he made an extraordinary decision.
He didn't ram the bomber, did he?
He did. Knowing he couldn't let the bomber reach its target, he deliberately flew his fighter plane into the German aircraft, sacrificing himself to prevent further casualties on the ground.
That's incredible. It's hard to fathom that level of courage. He willingly gave his life to protect others.
His actions are a testament to the bravery and selflessness of so many RAF pilots. During the Battle of Britain, they faced death every time they took to the skies, yet they continued to fight with unwavering determination.
It's truly inspiring. And amidst these larger-than-life stories of heroism, Dan Snow also brings us a more personal account. The story of a dogfight between a British Spitfire pilot named Tony Lovell and a German Messerschmitt 109 pilot named Herbert Chopper.
Yes. And what makes this account so compelling is that we get perspectives from both sides of the engagement. Lovell describes the intensity of the dogfight, the adrenaline rush, and the split-second decisions that determined whether he lived or died.
And what about Chopper? What was his experience like?
Chopper's account is quite poignant. He talks about his longing to return to France, to his fiancée and their upcoming wedding. He speaks of these dreams even as his plane is being hit by bullets. It's a stark reminder that there were individuals with hopes, fears, and dreams on both sides of this conflict, young men caught in a maelstrom of events they didn't start but couldn't escape.
It really does humanize the enemy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy to forget that these weren't just faceless adversaries. They were real people, just like the British pilots, caught up in a conflict that was far bigger than themselves.
Absolutely. And as the battle raged on September 15th, with all its chaos and sacrifice, turned out to be a turning point for the Luftwaffe. They suffered heavy losses that day, far more than they could sustain.
So it was a Pyrrhic victory for the Germans. They won the day, but at a terrible cost.
You could say that the heavy losses on that day, coupled with the ongoing resilience of the RAF, convinced the German high command that they could not achieve air superiority over Britain. Their dreams of a swift and decisive victory were dashed.
So in a sense, September 15th, Battle of Britain Day, marked the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe campaign.
It did. It was the day their plans for an invasion were effectively shattered. The Battle of Britain had reached its climax, and Britain had prevailed.
You know, it's amazing when you think about the sheer scale of this battle, the sheer number of aircraft involved, and the intensity of the fighting. It must have felt like the fate of the world was hanging in the balance.
It was a pivotal moment in history, and amidst all the chaos and destruction, the British people, they never wavered. Their spirit, their determination to resist Nazi aggression, it was truly remarkable.
Yeah, they had a lot to fight for, didn't they? Their freedom, their way of life, everything was at stake. And in a way, it feels like the Battle of Britain wasn't just about winning a military campaign. You know, it was about something much bigger.
You're right. It was about defending a set of values, about standing up for democracy and freedom against these forces of tyranny. The Battle of Britain, it became a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope in a world that was, rapidly descending into darkness.
So as we reflect on everything we've discussed, what do you think are some of the most significant takeaways from the Battle of Britain? What lessons can we learn from this pivotal moment in history?
Well, first and foremost, I think it really highlights the power of the human spirit, the courage and resilience shown by the RAF pilots, the ground crews, the factory workers, the everyday citizens who endured the Blitz. It's a testament to what people can achieve when they're united in a common cause.
It's a reminder that even when facing overwhelming odds, even when things seem hopeless, it's important to never give up, to keep fighting for what you believe in.
Absolutely. And the Battle of Britain also underscores the crucial role of technology in shaping the course of conflicts. Radar, it gave the British a decisive advantage, allowing them to anticipate and counter the Luftwaffe's attacks. And it's fascinating to think about how technology continues to influence warfare even today.
Yeah, it's a reminder that innovation, adaptability, the willingness to embrace new technologies can be crucial in any struggle, whether it's a global war or a personal challenge.
Precisely. And I think another key takeaway is the importance of leadership. Winston Churchill, his speeches during the Battle of Britain, his unwavering belief in victory, they played a huge role in bolstering morale and inspiring the British people to resist.
Yeah, his words, they resonated not only in Britain, but around the world. He became a symbol of defiance, a voice for freedom in a time when it was desperately needed.
Exactly. His leadership was crucial in uniting the nation and rallying the world to the cause of fighting Nazi tyranny.
So, for those of you listening out there, what are your own reflections on the Battle of Britain? What stories or insights resonated with you the most? Perhaps you have family connections to the battle, or maybe it's simply the themes of courage, resilience, and the fight for freedom that speak to you.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, share your comments on our website, or connect with us on social media.
And remember, the deep dive is all about exploring fascinating chapters of history, technology, and the human experience. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and join us as we continue to delve into compelling stories from the past and present.
We've got some incredible episodes lined up, covering everything from ancient civilizations to groundbreaking scientific discoveries. There's something for everyone who's curious about the world around us.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.